The scent of his expensive cologne, usually a comfort, now clung to the silk lining of his jacket like a poisonous shroud. Her fingers trembling, brushed against crisp paper. Not receipts, not business cards, airline tickets, two of them. First class, to a sun-drenched paradise she'd only dreamed of. But the second ticket, nestled intimately beside his, didn't bear her name. In that sickening, heart-stopping instant, Amelia's world, meticulously built on love and whispered promises, began to shatter. His child, their son, cooed softly in the nursery, oblivious to the storm about to break. The silence in their sprawling penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side was a familiar entity, vast and echoing, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the state-of-the-art air purifiers and the occasional distant wail of a city siren. Amelia had grown accustomed to it, this opulent quietude. Julian, her husband, was a man of grand gestures and even grander absences. His empire, a sprawling network of tech startups and venture capital, demanded his constant attention, or so he always said. Tonight, however, the silence felt different. It felt heavier, colder, pressing in on her with a suffocating weight. Leo, their 6-month-old son, was finally asleep in his meticulously designed nursery, a room Julian had spared no expense on, but had rarely entered. Amelia, still wearing the simple cotton dress she'd put on that morning, a far cry from the designer gowns Julian preferred her in for his glittering social events, walked through their cavernous living room. Abstract art adorned the walls, pieces Julian had acquired at exclusive auctions, their emotional resonance lost on Amelia. They were merely expensive decorations in her gilded cage. Julian had called an hour ago, his voice clipped businesslike. "Don't wait up, Amelia. Board meeting ran late. Another crisis." It was the standard excuse, one she'd heard variations of countless times, especially in the last year that had seen the birth of their son and the simultaneous insidious decay of their intimacy. She paused by the mahogany console table in the grand foyer where Julian had carelessly tossed his custom-tailored Brioni jacket upon his brief return home earlier that afternoon to freshen up before heading out again. He'd been jumpy, his eyes darting a stark contrast to the cool, collected billionaire the world saw. He'd barely glanced at Leo, who had gurgled happily from his playmat. The memory sent a familiar pang through Amelia's chest, a dull ache of neglect, of being secondary or perhaps tertiary in her husband's life. A sudden, inexplicable urge overcame her. It wasn't something she usually did. Julian valued his privacy with an almost paranoid fervor, but the unease that had been her shadow for months sharpened into a pointed premonition. Her hand, almost of its own volition, reached out and slipped into the inner pocket of his jacket. His scent, a bespoke blend of sandalwood and bergamot she'd once found intoxicating, now seemed to carry a foreign, unsettling note. Her fingers brushed against something smooth and crisp, not the usual stray receipt or a crumpled business card. These were thicker, more substantial. She pulled them out. Airline tickets. 2 of them. First class, of course. Julian never flew anything less. Her heart gave a strange little flutter. A surprise trip. He hadn't mentioned anything, but then he rarely shared his plans with her anymore. She unfolded the first ticket, her eyes scanning the details. Julian Croft. Departure JFK. Arrival MLE. Valana International Airport, Maldives. Date June 7th. 2 days from now. A faint smile touched her lips. The Maldives. They'd talked about going there years ago, before the relentless expansion of his business, before Leo, before this chasm had opened between them. Maybe this was his way of trying to fix things, a grand sweeping gesture to rekindle the dying embers of their marriage. Hope, fragile and tentative, flickered within her. Then she unfolded the second ticket. The name printed in bold, elegant font was not Amelia Croft. It read Seraphina Dubois. The air punched out of Amelia's lungs. Seraphina Dubois. The name was vaguely familiar, an echo from some half-forgotten business dinner or a glossy magazine spread featuring up-and-coming socialites. Not a close friend, not family, definitely not her. Her gaze flicked back and forth between the two tickets, her mind struggling to process the stark, brutal truth printed in indelible ink. Julian Croft and Seraphina Dubois. Maldives. June 7th. The silence of the apartment now roared in her ears. The city lights, usually a glittering panorama from their floor-to-ceiling windows, blurred into a meaningless smear of colors. Her legs felt weak, and she leaned against the cold marble of the console table for support. A honeymoon, but not with his wife, not with the mother of his child. Flashbacks, unbidden and cruel, assaulted her. Julian, years ago, his eyes alight with adoration, slipping a simple silver band on her finger, on a windswept beach in Montauk, whispering promises of forever. Julian, his voice thick with emotion. When they'd first found out she was pregnant with Leo, swearing he'd be the best father, the most devoted husband. Julian, more recently, his face illuminated by his phone screen, late at night, a cool distance in his eyes when she tried to reach for him. His increasingly frequent business trips, the hushed phone calls he'd take in his study, the faint, almost imperceptible scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirts. It all coalesced now, each forgotten detail, each dismissed suspicion, slotting into place with horrifying clarity. The late nights weren't just about board meetings. The distance wasn't just stress. It was betrayal, calculated and cruel. He was leaving in 2 days, leaving her, leaving Leo, to embark on a romantic escape with another woman while she, Amelia, was left to change diapers, to soothe a crying baby in the lonely hours of the night, to navigate the hollow shell of their marriage. The initial shock began to recede, replaced by a cold rising tide of fury. How could he, after everything they'd been through, after she dedicated her life to him, to their family, she had stood by him when his first major company had teetered on the brink of collapse, offering unwavering support. She had endured the snide comments from his established old-money family who had initially looked down on her more modest background. She had birthed his son, their legacy. Her gaze drifted towards the nursery. Leo. Her beautiful, innocent Leo. He deserved so much better than a father capable of such profound deceit, such callous disregard for their hearts. The tickets in her hand felt like scorching brands. She wanted to rip them into 1,000 pieces, to scream until the crystal vases shattered. But a different instinct, a chillingly calm resolve began to take root amidst the maelstrom of her emotions. Confrontation felt too immediate, too raw. He would deny it. He would lie. He was a master manipulator, skilled at twisting words, at making her doubt her own sanity. He'd done it subtly for years. No. This time, she needed more than just a suspicion confirmed by 2 pieces of paper. She needed irrefutable proof. She needed to understand the full scope of his treachery before she confronted the man she had once loved, the man who was now a stranger. Her mind, sharpened by the adrenaline of betrayal, began to work. The name Seraphina Dubois echoed. She had to know who this woman was, how deep this went. The tickets were just the beginning. The cold dread in her heart told her there was far more to uncover in the carefully constructed facade of Julian Croft's life. The veneer of the perfect millionaire husband was about to be stripped away, and Amelia, armed with a mother's protective fury and a wife's shattered heart, would be the one to do it. The next 36 hours were a blur of feigned normalcy and frantic clandestine investigation. Amelia moved through her days like an automaton caring for Leo with a tenderness that felt amplified by the raw wound in her soul. Each smile from her son, each innocent gurgle, was both a balm and a fresh stab of pain, a reminder of what Julian was so willing to discard. She had to be clever. Julian was a man of intense control, his digital life undoubtedly fortified. But 9 years of marriage had taught her some of his habits, his vanities, his occasional carelessness, born of arrogance. His main personal laptop, a sleek silver affair he rarely let out of his sight, was the first target. He'd left it in his study, confident in its password protection. But Amelia remembered a conversation from years ago, a rare moment of shared vulnerability. He'd mentioned his childhood dog, Maximus, and the year he'd gotten him 98. Maximus 98. It was a long shot, a desperate guess. Her fingers trembled as she typed it in. Access granted. A wave of nausea mixed with triumphant horror washed over her. The screen illuminated a life parallel to hers, a life she had no part in. His emails were a labyrinth of business dealings, but nestled amongst them were folders she'd never suspected. One, cryptically labeled SD Projects, caught her eye. It wasn't project proposals or investment summaries. It was a treasure trove of his betrayal. Emails spanning back over a year, filled with sickeningly sweet nothings, clandestine meeting arrangements, and lavish gift confirmations. Airline confirmations for 2 to Paris, Rome, a private villa in Santorini. Jewelry receipts from Cartier and Bulgari, pieces she'd never seen, certainly never received. He'd even been CC'd on Serafina's lease agreement for a luxury apartment in Soho, an apartment whose rent Julian was clearly covering. And then there were the photos. Serafina Dubois was stunning in a sharp, predatory way. Raven hair, piercing blue eyes, a figure that seemed poured into designer dresses. There were pictures of her and Julian at exclusive parties. Amelia hadn't been invited to. Julian's arm possessively around Serafina's waist, his smile more vibrant, more alive than Amelia had seen it in years. There were intimate selfies, Serafina looking adoringly at Julian. Julian looking happy, genuinely happy, a happiness he no longer shared with his wife. Amelia's breath hitched. One photo in particular twisted the knife deeper. It was dated 7 months ago. Amelia had been heavily pregnant, then swollen and exhausted, while Julian had claimed to be on a crucial business trip to Singapore. The photos showed him and Serafina on a yacht, bathed in golden sunlight, champagne flutes in hand, their bodies close, laughing. He'd been with her while Amelia was preparing for the birth of their child. The rage that had been simmering now threatened to boil over, scalding hot and corrosive. This wasn't a recent indiscretion, a fleeting mistake. This was a calculated long-term affair, a meticulously constructed second life. He had been systematically deceiving her, living a lie, while she naively believed in their vows, in their future. She dug deeper, her initial shock giving way to a grim determination. Social media. Serafina Dubois wasn't hard to find. Her Instagram profile was public, a curated gallery of a life of luxury and leisure. Designer clothes, exotic locations, Michelin-starred meals. And there subtly woven into her posts were hints of Julian, a man's watch peeking into frame. Julian's Patek Philippe, a reflection in sunglasses showing his distinctive profile, a caption about a surprise getaway that coincided with one of Julian's business trips. Serafina was flaunting it, albeit discreetly enough to maintain a veneer of deniability. But to Amelia, armed with the truth, it was a brazen display of disrespect. She was living the life Julian had promised Amelia, the life Amelia was currently denied, cooped up with a baby, while her husband gallivanted across the globe with his mistress. The discovery of the Maldives tickets to the Conrad Maldives Rangali Island, a place renowned for its romantic underwater restaurant and secluded overwater villas, felt like the ultimate insult. It was the epitome of a lover's paradise, a place Julian should have taken her. Instead, he was taking Serafina. A honeymoon, indeed. Amelia meticulously saved everything. Emails, photos, screenshots. She created a secure, encrypted file, a digital dossier of her husband's betrayal. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. It was about protecting herself and Leo. Julian was wealthy and powerful. If this ended in divorce, and she knew with chilling certainty that it must, he would use every resource to crush her, to paint her as hysterical or unstable. She needed ammunition. The hardest part was maintaining composure whenever Julian was home, which was blessedly infrequent in those 2 days. He was palpably excited, a nervous energy thrumming beneath his usual cool exterior. He attributed it to a major deal about to close, even patting Amelia's arm with a condescending, "You'll see, darling, big things are coming." Amelia wanted to scream, to throw the damning evidence in his face, but she held back, her resolve hardening into something cold and sharp. She needed the right moment, the right way. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a hysterical outburst. She would meet his betrayal with calculated precision. The evening before his scheduled departure, Julian was packing. Not in their shared bedroom, but in the guest suite, claiming he didn't want to wake her or Leo when he left for his early flight to Zurich for a banking conference. Another lie, so effortless, so practiced. Amelia watched him from the doorway, her heart a frozen lump in her chest. He hummed softly as he folded expensive linen shirts and new swim trunks. He even packed a bottle of her favorite champagne, the one they'd shared on their anniversary. The audacity was breathtaking. "Zurich, huh?" Amelia said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Sounds important." Julian glanced up, a quick, almost startled look, then his charming mask slipped back into place. "Extremely darling. This could set us up for years." He gestured vaguely. "Don't worry your pretty little head about it." "Right." Amelia said the word, like acid on her tongue. "Just us, me and Leo, holding down the fort." A flicker of something, guilt, annoyance, crossed his face. "Exactly. You're doing a wonderful job, Amelia. Truly." He zipped his suitcase with a decisive tug. "I'll call you from Zurich." This was it, her last chance, before he walked out the door, before he jetted off to paradise with his mistress. The carefully constructed dam of her control threatened to break. She walked into the room, her hands clasped behind her back to hide their trembling. "Julian," she began, her voice low, "before you go, there's something I need to show you." He looked impatient. "Can it wait, Amelia? I'm on a tight schedule." "No," she said firmly. "It really can't." She stepped aside, gesturing to the large, smart TV mounted on the guest room wall. She'd spent the afternoon setting it up. With a click of the remote, she held the screen flickered to life, not with a news channel or a streaming service, but with a slideshow. The first image was the one of Julian and Serafina on the yacht, laughing, champagne in hand. Julian froze his hand, still on the handle of his suitcase. The color drained from his face. His eyes darted from the screen to Amelia, then back to the screen, his carefully crafted composure beginning to crack. "What is this?" he stammered, his voice raspy. Amelia didn't answer. She let the images speak for themselves. Photos of him and Serafina in Paris, outside the apartment he rented for her, the receipts for jewelry, the intimate selfies. Each one a nail in the coffin of their marriage. Then the final image, the two airline tickets to the Maldives. Side by side. His name and Serafina Dubois. Destination, Conrad Maldives, Rangali Island. The silence in the room was absolute, save for the faint, almost mocking sound of Julian's excited humming from moments before, now trapped in Amelia's memory. Julian stared at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He looked like a man watching his meticulously built world crumble around him. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, speechless. "Zurich?" Amelia finally asked, her voice dripping with icy sarcasm. "Or is the banking conference being held at an underwater restaurant in the Maldives this year?" Julian slowly turned to face her. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hunted look. "Amelia, I can explain." "Can you, Julian?" Amelia's voice was deceptively soft, but underscored with a steeliness he had never heard before. "Can you explain the last year of lies? Can you explain her apartment, the gifts, the trips? Can you explain planning a romantic getaway with your mistress while your wife was at home recovering from childbirth, raising your son?" Each question was a hammer blow. Julian flinched. It's not what it looks like." A harsh, humorless laugh escaped Amelia's lips. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like, Julian. It looks like betrayal. It looks like adultery. It looks like you're a liar and a cheat." "Amelia, please," he pleaded, taking a step towards her. "Let's talk about this. Don't do this." "Do what, Julian?" She shot back, her eyes blazing. "Expose your deceit. I think I'm well within my rights. You booked those tickets. You packed that bag. You were going to walk out that door and fly to paradise with another woman, leaving me and Leo here without a second thought." He ran a hand through his hair, his composure shattering. It was a mistake. "Serafina, she doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything." Amelia gestured to the screen where a photo of Julian and Serafina kissing passionately was now displayed. A year-long affair, lavish gifts, a secret apartment, a honeymoon to the Maldives. That's your definition of "doesn't mean anything." She shook her head, a bitter disappointment settling deep in her bones. "You know, Julian, for the longest time I blamed myself. I thought I wasn't exciting enough, not beautiful enough, not billionaire wife enough after having Leo. But now I see, this isn't about me. This is about you, your selfishness, your monumental ego." "Amelia," his voice was desperate now. He knew he was caught irrefutably. "What do you want, money? Is that it? I can give you anything." Her eyes narrowed. "What I wanted, Julian, was a husband, a faithful partner, a father to our son. Clearly that was too much to ask. What I want now," she paused, letting the words hang in the air, "is for you to get out." "Get out?" He looked stunned. "But my flight." "Oh, you can still make your flight," Amelia said, a chilling smile playing on her lips. Go to the Maldives, enjoy your honeymoon with Serafina. But when you get back, if you even bother to come back here, don't expect me or Leo to be waiting." "You can't be serious," he whispered aghast. Amelia, think about Leo. A child needs his father. Leo needs a father who respects his mother. Amelia retorted, her voice rising. Leo needs a father who doesn't abandon his family for a sordid affair. And frankly, Julian, right now, you are not that man. She pointed to his suitcase. Go, before I call security and have you escorted out of your own penthouse. Julian stared at her, seeing not the compliant, gentle wife he had taken for granted, but a woman transformed by betrayal, a woman with eyes of steel. He looked at the damning evidence on the screen, then back at Amelia's resolute face. He knew in that moment that he had monumentally miscalculated. He had underestimated her. Without another word, his face a mixture of fury, shame, and disbelief, Julian grabbed his suitcase. He walked towards the door, then paused, his hand on the knob. He looked back at Amelia, perhaps expecting a last-minute reprieve, a crack in her resolve. There was none. He opened the door and walked out, the click of the closing latch echoing the final, definitive end of their marriage as Amelia had known it. She stood alone in the guest room, the slideshow of his betrayal still playing on the screen, the silence of the massive apartment pressing in on her once more. But this time, it wasn't the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of a coming storm, and she, Amelia Croft, was ready to weather it. The fight for her future and Leo's had just begun. Julian left. He actually left. Amelia had half expected him to grovel, to cancel his plans, to make some grand, desperate attempt at reconciliation. But the lure of Serafina and the prepaid Maldivian escape proved stronger than any remorse or responsibility. Or perhaps his pride, stung by her uncharacteristic defiance, propelled him forward. The heavy thud of the apartment door closing behind him had been like a gavel striking down on the verdict of their marriage, guilty of betrayal, sentenced to dissolution. The days that followed were a strange mixture of crushing emptiness and nascent liberation. The penthouse, once a symbol of their shared success, now felt like an opulent prison, each luxurious item a reminder of Julian's duplicity. The king-sized bed in their master suite was cold and vast. His side, undisturbed, was a constant silent accusation. Amelia found herself sleeping in Leo's nursery, curled on a plush armchair, the soft breathing of her son, the only comfort in the long, dark nights. Reality hit hard. Julian, true to his wordless departure, made no immediate contact. His phone went straight to voicemail. No, I've arrived safely in Zurich text. No, I've made a terrible mistake call. Just silence. A silence that screamed of his indifference. Then came the financial freeze. Amelia discovered it when her private credit card, the one Julian had insisted she have for incidentals, was declined at the local gourmet grocery store. Humiliation burned her cheeks as she fumbled for her debit card, linked to a joint account she now suspected was being systematically emptied or restricted. A quick check of her online banking confirmed her fears. Large sums had been transferred out. Access to significant funds was suddenly inexplicably blocked. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her grief. Julian wasn't just abandoning her emotionally, he was attempting to cripple her financially. He was trying to control her, to punish her for her defiance. How was she supposed to care for Leo, for herself? The staff, the nanny, the housekeeper, the chef Julian had insisted upon, they would all need to be paid. The penthouse itself, with its astronomical maintenance fees, was a looming liability. She thought of the prenuptial agreement she had signed, a document Julian's phalanx of lawyers had drafted, and hers, a less formidable attorney Julian had recommended and paid for, had cursorily reviewed. At the time, blinded by love and trust, she'd thought it a mere formality. Now its intricate clauses and carefully worded loopholes loomed as a potential cage. Desperation warred with a stubborn pride. She wouldn't beg him. Not yet. Not ever, if she could help it. Her first call was to her sister Claire, a pragmatic, no-nonsense lawyer living in Chicago. Claire listened patiently as Amelia poured out the sordid tale, her voice cracking with unshed tears and righteous anger. "The bastard," Claire said, her voice tight with fury. "The absolute unmitigated bastard. Okay, Amelia, listen to me. First, breathe. You're not alone in this. Second, document everything. Every declined transaction, every unanswered call, every communication you do receive. Third, we need to get you a shark, not the guppy Julian picked out for your prenup review." Claire's steady voice was a lifeline. Over the next few days, Amelia, with Claire's remote guidance, began to fight back. She found a new lawyer, a formidable woman named Ms. Davenport, who specialized in high-net-worth divorces and had a reputation for devouring arrogant husbands for breakfast. The opulence that surrounded Amelia became a source of bitter irony. She was living in a multi-million-dollar penthouse surrounded by priceless art and designer furniture, yet she was counting pennies, worried about buying formula for Leo. She had to let the chef and the housekeeper go, a painful necessity that brought with it a fresh wave of shame. The nanny Maria, a kind older woman who genuinely adored Leo, offered to stay on for reduced pay or even for free for a while. Amelia, touched by her loyalty, insisted on paying her what she could from her dwindling personal savings she'd accrued from her own freelance graphic design work before Julian had insisted she give it up to be a full-time wife and mother. The isolation was profound. Her former friends, mostly wives of Julian's business associates, women she'd lunched with and attended charity galas with, suddenly grew distant. Calls went unreturned. Invitations dried up. She was no longer Mrs. Julian Croft, the wife of the golden boy. She was becoming a pariah, a woman scorned, and in their shallow world that was contagious. But amidst the struggle, a flicker of resilience began to ignite within Amelia. Looking at Leo, her beautiful, innocent son, who knew nothing of his parents' turmoil, only of love and need, she found a strength she hadn't known she possessed. He was her reason, her motivation. She would not crumble. She would not let Julian destroy them. She started taking on small freelance design projects again, working late into the night, after Leo was asleep, the click of her mouse, a tiny rebellion against Julian's financial warfare. It wasn't much, but it was hers. And then the social media taunts began. Serafina Dubois, emboldened by her tropical tryst, started posting more overtly. Photos from the Conrad Maldives, Rangali Island, flooded her Instagram feed. Serafina, in a bikini, on a pristine white sand beach, her arm draped around a man whose face was just out of shot, but whose distinctive watch was clearly visible. Serafina dining at Ithar, the underwater restaurant, a champagne flute raised in a toast, the caption reading, "To new beginnings and unforgettable nights." #blessed, #paradise, found, love of my life. Each post was a fresh twist of the knife. Amelia knew Julian was seeing them. Was he proud? Was this his way of flaunting his new life, of further humiliating her? The cruelty was breathtaking. She imagined him showing Serafina her distraught messages, laughing at her pain. One evening, as Amelia rocked a colicky Leo, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Amelia, darling, Julian's voice smooth and infuriatingly calm, as if he were calling to discuss the weather. Just checking in. How are you and Leo managing? Amelia's grip tightened on the phone. Managing, she repeated, her voice dangerously low. We're managing despite your best efforts to leave us with nothing, Julian, while you're sunning yourself in paradise with your companion. A sigh from his end. Always so dramatic, Amelia. I simply transferred some assets for safekeeping. Business is volatile. You wouldn't understand. I understand betrayal, Julian. I understand abandonment. I understand that you are a despicable excuse for a husband and a father. Now, he chided. Let's not be unpleasant. I'm willing to be reasonable. Once I'm back from this essential trip, we can discuss a settlement. A fair one, of course, for Leo's sake. For Leo's sake, Amelia scoffed. You haven't asked a single specific question about your son. You have no idea how he is. You only care about yourself and your assets. Serafina says hi, by the way. He added a casual cruelty that stole her breath. She finds the Maldives quite agreeable. We both do. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. He was actively taunting her, using the other woman as a weapon. This wasn't just indifference, it was malice. Tell Serafina, Amelia said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage, that she's welcome to you, Julian. She's welcome to a man who abandons his child, who lies and cheats, and who will undoubtedly do the exact same thing to her one day. You're a matched set. She hung up her hand, shaking. The sheer audacity, the cold-heartedness of it, was staggering. He felt no remorse, only a sense of entitlement and a desire to inflict further pain. But as the days turned into weeks, Julian's absence, once a source of acute pain, began to transform into something else. A space. A space for Amelia to breathe, to think, to rediscover who she was without him. The penthouse, though still echoing with his betrayal, also became her fortress. She rearranged the furniture, packed away his belongings, filled the sterile rooms with children's toys and the scent of baby powder, and her own quiet determination. She found an online support group for women in similar situations, wives of wealthy, powerful men who had been discarded. Their stories, though heartbreaking, were also empowering. They shared advice, offered encouragement, and reminded her that she wasn't alone. Ms. Davenport, her lawyer, was a force of nature. She filed for divorce on grounds of adultery and extreme cruelty, attaching the mountain of evidence Amelia had collected. She also filed for emergency financial relief, fighting to unfreeze Amelia's access to marital assets needed for her and Leo's support. The battle was far from over. Julian, with his battery of high-powered attorneys, would fight her every step of the way. He would try to drag her name through the mud, to paint her as an unfit mother, a gold digger. Amelia knew this, but the fear that had once crippled her was slowly being replaced by a steely resolve. She looked at Leo, sleeping peacefully in her arms, his tiny hand clutching her finger. He was the diamond shard left from the wreckage of her marriage, sharp, precious, and a reminder that even from brokenness, something incredibly beautiful and strong could endure. Julian could take the money, the penthouse, the lifestyle, but he could not take her spirit, and he could not take her son. She would raise Leo to be everything Julian was not: kind, compassionate, and loyal. The silence of the apartment still lingered, but now it was filled with the quiet hum of Amelia's laptop as she worked the soft lullabies she sang to Leo, and the growing, unshakable belief in her own strength. She was no longer just Julian Croft's discarded wife. She was Amelia, mother to Leo and a survivor, and her story was far from over. While Amelia was painstakingly rebuilding her life brick by brick, Julian Croft was living his fantasy in the sun-drenched Maldives. The Conrad Maldives Rangali Island was every bit as idyllic as advertised. Serafina Dubois was an enthusiastic and decorative companion, her laughter echoing across their private sun deck, her expertly curated Instagram posts painting a picture of blissful romance for her envious followers. Julian, for a time, managed to push aside the nagging image of Amelia's accusing eyes and the uncomfortable weight of his own duplicity. He was Julian Croft, master of his universe, and this was his reward. He reveled in the admiring glances Serafina drew in the perceived envy of other guests. He showered her with expensive dinners at Ithar, with spa treatments, with promises of a future unencumbered by the constraints of his previous life. Serafina, in turn, played her role to perfection, her adoration, unwavering her demands, artfully veiled as desires. But paradise Julian was about to discover had a price, and the foundations of his empire, built on aggressive expansion and often ethically dubious shortcuts, were not as solid as he believed. The first tremor came via a terse, encrypted message from his second-in-command, Marcus Thorne, a man whose loyalty Julian had always bought, never earned. Urgent, Project Chimera flagged, SEC inquiry initiated, media sniffing, return ASAP. Project Chimera was Julian's magnum opus, a highly speculative tech venture into AI-driven predictive analytics into which he had poured hundreds of millions, much of it leveraged, some of it from questionable sources. It was supposed to be his crowning achievement, the venture that would elevate him from mere millionaire to a legend of industry. An SEC inquiry was bad. Media involvement was catastrophic. Julian, lounging by his private infinity pool with Serafina, felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Business, he muttered, already reaching for his satellite phone. A minor hiccup. Serafina pouted prettily. Can't it wait, darling? We were about to order more champagne. This is important, Seri, he said, his tone sharper than intended. The casual, carefree bubble of their Maldivian escape had just been pricked. The call to Marcus painted a grim picture. Whistleblowers, allegations of market manipulation, insider trading, and misrepresentation of financial health to investors. The minor hiccup was rapidly escalating into a full-blown crisis. Julian's carefully constructed house of cards was swaying precariously. He cut the honeymoon short, much to Serafina's vocal displeasure. The return journey was tense. Julian was glued to his phone, his charm replaced by a brusque anxiety. Serafina, sensing the shift in his fortunes, became less adoring, more demanding. Her questions about the problem were tinged with a self-serving concern that Julian, in his mounting panic, failed to fully register. Back in New York, the situation was even worse than he'd feared. Headlines screamed his name. Tech titan Julian Croft under federal investigation. Project Chimera, innovation or illusion? His photograph, once a symbol of aspirational success, now looked like a mugshot. Investors were panicking. His stock prices were plummeting. Lines of credit were being withdrawn. The cool, collected billionaire facade began to crack under the immense pressure. Julian, who thrived on control, found himself in a situation spiraling rapidly beyond it. He barked orders, called in favors, and threw money at lawyers, but the tide of public opinion and regulatory scrutiny was turning against him with ferocious speed. And then Serafina delivered her own personal coup de grace. One morning, Julian woke up in the Soho apartment he'd leased for her. He couldn't bear to face the silent, accusing emptiness of his penthouse yet, to find her gone. A note scrawled on expensive hotel stationery lay on the pillow beside him. "Julian, this isn't what I signed up for. I'm a creature of comfort and success, not scandal and potential ruin." The Maldives were lovely, but it seems the dream is over. My lawyers will be in touch regarding the outstanding promises and compensation for my time and emotional investment. Consider it a severance package. Goodbye and good luck. You'll need it. S. No love. No darling. Just cold, hard transaction. The jewelry he'd lavished on her was gone. Several valuable art pieces he'd hung in the apartment were also conspicuously absent. She had been, from start to finish, an opportunist, a beautiful parasite who had attached herself to his wealth and success, and who was now detaching with surgical precision as the host began to fail. The betrayal so soon after his own monumental deceit against Amelia was a bitter pill to swallow. Julian Croft, the master manipulator, had been played. Serafina hadn't loved him. She'd loved what he could provide, and now that the provision was threatened, she was gone, taking what she could with her. The irony was not lost on him, even in his despair. He had chosen the glittering, superficial allure of Serafina over the quiet, steadfast loyalty of Amelia. He had traded gold for pyrite. Days turned into weeks of grueling legal battles, public humiliation, and financial hemorrhaging. His so-called friends and business partners, who had once clamored for his attention, now avoided his calls. The sycophants disappeared. The empire he had built with such ruthless ambition was crumbling, and he was powerless to stop it. He found himself alone in the sterile Soho apartment, the silence mocking him. The scent of Serafina's expensive perfume still lingered, a ghost of his folly. He drank too much, slept too little. The reflection that stared back at him from the mirror was a haggard, desperate man he barely recognized. One particularly bleak afternoon, after a brutal meeting with his lawyers, where they outlined the very real possibility of criminal charges and financial ruin, Julian found himself wandering aimlessly through Central Park. He saw mothers with their children laughing, playing. A sharp pang of regret, so intense it almost buckled his knees, hit him. Leo, his son. He hadn't seen Leo in weeks. He hadn't truly seen him, held him for much longer. In his pursuit of more money, more excitement, more adoration, he had risked losing the one thing that might have been real, the one person who loved him unconditionally. The memory of Amelia's face, her eyes blazing with a righteous fury he now understood, haunted him. She had warned him. She had told him Serafina would do this. And she had been right. He thought of the penthouse, his former kingdom. He'd received terse updates from his lawyers that Amelia was fighting fiercely, not just for a fair settlement, but for full custody of Leo. And given his current public image and the circumstances of his departure, she was likely to get it. The Conrad Maldives, Rangali Island, the scene of his ill-fated honeymoon, now seemed like a distant, shameful dream. The sun, the sea, Serafina's practiced smiles. It had all been an illusion, a mirage purchased with lies and built on a foundation of deceit. The real world, with its harsh consequences, had come crashing back with a vengeance. Julian Croft, the millionaire, the titan, the master of his universe, was broken. He had flown too close to the sun, his wings of arrogance and deceit melting away, sending him plummeting back to earth. And as he sat alone on a park bench, the chilly autumn air biting at his face, he realized he had not only lost his empire and his mistress, but he had also, quite possibly, irrevocably, lost his wife and son. The price of his betrayal was proving to be far higher than he could ever have imagined. The news of Julian's spectacular downfall reached Amelia through a mixture of terse updates from Ms. Davenport and the sensational headlines that painted him as a fallen idol. There was a grim satisfaction in seeing him face consequences, but it was overshadowed by a more complex brew of emotions, a lingering pity for the man she had once loved, a pragmatic concern for Leo's future financial security, what little might be salvaged from Julian's wreckage, and a weary sense of vindication. Seraphina's swift abandonment of him was no surprise. Amelia had seen the parasitic glitter in the woman's eyes from the photos alone. Her life had settled into a new, challenging rhythm. The penthouse, once a symbol of Julian's betrayal, was now solely her domain, albeit one she was fighting to keep, or at least secure a fair portion of its value from. She worked tirelessly on her freelance design projects, her client base slowly growing through word of mouth and sheer determination. Maria, the nanny, remained a steadfast ally, her presence allowing Amelia the hours she needed to earn a living. Leo was thriving, a happy, gurgling baby, oblivious to the drama engulfing his parents. He was Amelia's anchor, her unwavering focus. Several months after his ignominious return from the Maldives and the subsequent implosion of his life, Julian appeared at her door, unannounced. Amelia was in the nursery, humming softly as she changed Leo's diaper. Maria had the afternoon off. The doorbell chimed an unfamiliar sound now that her social circle had evaporated, and deliveries were usually left with the concierge. Cautiously, she peered through the peephole. Julian. He looked diminished. His expensive suit was rumpled, his usually immaculate hair disheveled. There were dark circles under his eyes and a desperate, haunted look that hadn't been there before. He was a shadow of the arrogant, powerful man who had walked out months earlier. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over Amelia. Anger, yes, still simmering beneath the surface, but also a strange, unwelcome flicker of the old affection twisted with pity. She steeled herself. This was not the Julian she had married. This was a broken man, likely here for his own selfish reasons. She opened the door a crack, the security chain still in place. "Julian, what do you want?" His eyes bloodshot and weary, fixed on hers. "Amelia, please, can I come in? Can I see Leo?" His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual confident timbre. The mention of Leo was a calculated blow, and Amelia knew it. But the raw desperation in his eyes seemed genuine. She hesitated. Her lawyer had advised minimal contact. But looking at him, a man clearly at his nadir, some deeply buried instinct of compassion stirred. "5 minutes," she said, her voice cool. "And then you leave." She unlatched the chain and stepped back, allowing him into the foyer. He looked around the apartment, his gaze lingering on the subtle changes she had made. The absence of his personal effects, the presence of more baby gear. It was no longer his domain. "He's in the nursery," Amelia said, gesturing down the hall. Julian walked slowly, almost reverently, towards the room. He paused at the doorway, his breath catching. Leo was in his crib, babbling happily, kicking his small feet in the air. A rare, genuine smile touched Julian's lips, a smile that reached his tired eyes. He looked vulnerable. "He's gotten so big," Julian whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He took a tentative step into the room. Leo, seeing him, gurgled and waved his arms. Julian reached out a trembling hand towards the crib. then seemed to hesitate, looking at Amelia for permission. She gave a curt nod. He gently stroked Leo's soft cheek, his expression a mixture of awe and profound sadness. I've made a terrible mess of everything, Amelia, he said, his back still to her, his voice barely audible. Everything they're saying, most of it is true. Project Chimera is gone. The money, so much of it is gone. Serafina, he laughed, a harsh, self-deprecating sound. She was exactly what you probably thought she was. Amelia remained silent, leaning against the doorframe, her arms crossed. She would not make this easy for him. He turned to face her, his eyes pleading. I lost it all, Amelia. My company, my reputation, my self-respect, and I deserved it. I know I did. My lawyers tell me I might even face jail time. A shiver went down Amelia's spine at that, despite herself. The father of her child, a convicted criminal. Why are you telling me this, Julian? She asked, her voice devoid of inflection. Are you looking for sympathy, absolution? No, he said, shaking his head. Maybe. I don't know. I had nowhere else to go, no one else to talk to who wasn't paid to listen. And I needed to see him. He gestured again towards Leo, who was now chewing on his own fist, observing his father with wide, curious eyes. He's the only good thing I ever had a part in creating. The words, raw and seemingly heartfelt, chipped away at Amelia's defenses. This was not the manipulative Julian she had come to expect. This was a man stripped bare, confronting the wreckage of his own making. You abandoned him, Julian, she stated the truth of it, still a cold weight in her heart. You abandoned us both. You chose her and your ego over your family. I know, he said, his voice cracking, and I will regret that choice every second for the rest of my life. I was a fool, arrogant, selfish, blind. I can't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me. He took a step closer to her, his eyes searching hers. But Amelia, I want to try, to make amends, not for us. I know I've destroyed that, but for Leo, I want to be a father to him. If you'll let me. Anyway, you'll let me. He looked so broken, so utterly defeated. The powerful millionaire was gone, replaced by a penitent. Amelia's mind raced. Was this genuine remorse, or was it another calculated move, a desperate attempt to salvage something, anything, from the ashes of his life, perhaps even to use Leo to gain sympathy in his legal battles? What about Serafina? Amelia asked, the name still tasting like poison. Are you finally done with her? A look of profound disgust crossed Julian's face. She cleaned me out of what little wasn't frozen by the courts and disappeared the moment the headlines hit. She sent a bill from her lawyer for emotional distress. The irony is almost laughable. He ran a hand over his face. She was a symptom, Amelia, not the disease. The disease was in me, my greed, my need for constant validation. Amelia searched his eyes, looking for the telltale signs of deceit she had become so adept at recognizing. She saw pain, shame, and a deep, soul-crushing weariness. Perhaps this was real. Being a father, Julian, isn't just about showing up when your world falls apart, she said softly but firmly. It's about being there, consistently, reliably. It's about putting his needs before your own, something you have spectacularly failed to do. I know, he repeated, his gaze dropping to the floor. I understand that. And I don't expect you to trust me. I haven't earned it. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Therapy, supervised visitation, anything. I don't want to lose him, Amelia. He's my son. The raw plea in his voice resonated with the part of her that still remembered the man she had married, the man who had once looked at her with love, the man who had wept with joy when Leo was born. That man had been buried deep beneath layers of arrogance and deceit. But was it possible? A fragment of him remained. Leo suddenly let out a delighted squeal, reaching his arms towards Julian. It was a simple, innocent gesture, but it felt like a sign. Amelia's resolve, so ironclad moments before, softened almost imperceptibly. Her own pain was still immense, the betrayal a scar that would never fully fade. But Leo deserved a father if Julian could truly become one. Not for her sake, not even for Julian's, but for Leo's. "This changes nothing about the divorce, Julian," she said, her voice regaining some of its strength. "We are over, irrevocably." He nodded, his eyes filled with a sorrowful acceptance. "I understand. I deserve that. And if I agree to let you see Leo, it will be on my terms, strict terms. Miss Davenport will draft an agreement. Any deviation, any attempt to manipulate or control, and it's over, permanently." A flicker of hope ignited in Julian's eyes. "Anything, Amelia, anything." She looked at him, this broken man, who was inextricably linked to her through their child. The path ahead would be fraught with difficulty, with lingering distrust, and the ghosts of his betrayal. There would be no easy reconciliation, no magical return to a life that had been shattered. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for something new to be built from the ruins, a co-parenting relationship, fragile and imperfect, but focused on the well-being of their son. "All right, Julian." Amelia said the words heavy with the weight of her decision. "We can try. For Leo. But you have a very, very long way to go to prove you're capable of being the father he deserves." He let out a shaky breath, a mixture of relief and gratitude flooding his face. "Thank you, Amelia. Thank you. I won't let you down. I won't let him down. Not again." Amelia wasn't so sure. Trust, once shattered, was a difficult thing to rebuild. But as she watched Julian cautiously approach the crib again, his gaze fixed on his son, with an expression of dawning, painful love, she allowed herself a sliver of hope. Not for a rekindled romance, but for the possibility that Julian, humbled by his fall, might finally learn the true meaning of fatherhood. The reckoning had been brutal, but perhaps, just perhaps, it had also been a beginning. The months that followed Julian's tearful appearance at the nursery door were a slow, arduous journey. There were no grand epiphanies, no miraculous transformations overnight. Julian, humbled and under the constant scrutiny of both the legal system and Amelia's wary gaze, began the painstaking process of trying to piece his life and his role as a father back together. The divorce proceeded, finalized with less acrimony than Amelia had initially feared, largely due to Julian's newfound and uncharacteristic compliance. Ms. Davenport ensured Amelia received a fair settlement, enough to secure her and Leo's future, though it was a fraction of what Julian's worth had once been. The penthouse was sold, the proceeds divided. Amelia, opting for a life less ostentatious and more authentic, bought a charming brownstone in a quieter, family-friendly neighborhood, a place filled with light and the potential for new memories untainted by past betrayals. Julian, avoiding jail time, but facing hefty fines and a ban from holding executive positions in publicly traded companies for several years, moved into a modest apartment. His visits with Leo were initially supervised, gradually transitioning to short, unaccompanied outings as he demonstrated consistent responsibility and a genuine connection with his son. He attended therapy as promised and slowly began to confront the demons that had driven his destructive behavior. There were setbacks, Moments when Julian's old arrogance flickered when Amelia's distrust resurfaced, when the ghosts of Serafina and the Maldives threatened to cast long shadows. But for Leo's sake, they persevered, forging a fragile, functional co-parenting relationship. Julian learned to change diapers, to soothe tantrums, to simply be present, skills he had once outsourced or ignored. Amelia's journey was a painful odyssey through the darkest depths of betrayal, but it was also a testament to the enduring strength of a mother's love and the resilience of the human spirit. She didn't just survive. She emerged stronger, wiser, and fiercely independent, proving that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in dignity and self-worth. What did you think of Amelia's ultimate decision? Could you have found it in yourself to allow Julian back into his child's life, even after such profound deceit? Share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If this story resonated with you, if you felt Amelia's pain and cheered for her triumph, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories of drama resilience and the intricate tapestry of human relationships. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching.